Welcome to Endgame Sensei, where I give a position to two chump IMs that they will blow and make my hair go white. How long will they last? How much will I suffer? Stay tuned and find out on the show. All right, so here we go. Poll. The poll is a simple question. Who is better? And why? We'll just do who is better. So we're going to say white is winning. Clear advantage for white. Small advantage for white. Equal. Black is better. We're going to do about 5 minutes here. We're going to start this poll. Give people a chance to think about what they think is going on.
So I'm playing white?
Oh, well, no, not yet, Kostya. Not
You're
yet.
welcome to.
Here, we'll get rid of that for the moment.
Well, Kostya's going to be happy. He wanted an endgame with some more pieces on the board. This is not even an endgame in my estimation. Now we've switched the whole show to opening, Sensei.
We have some confusion about what endgame means. To me, this is definitely an endgame, but I understand. That's one I'm not going to jump on you about.
Sure.
I definitely.
I mean, and I don't mean to argue about it, but
yeah. Okay. It is an interesting thing. To me, the word endgame is something, it's a feel. I don't have any strict boundaries. It's just more a feeling than anything else.
yeah. To me, it's about the likelihood of a passed pawn promoting and the likelihood of a king getting checkmated. So as the likelihood of a king getting checkmated goes down, you're more in the end game. And as the likelihood of a passed pawn being an actual problem goes up, you're more in the end game.
I just had so many exceptions flash through my mind, Dave.
Yeah. Queen and rook versus queen and rook.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just feel like when the queens get traded, that's the end game.
You can tell Kostya learned chess at age 5 from somebody who wanted to make it really simple.
That's just how I think about it. Yeah. Just an end game with more pieces on the board.
He's like, a 1400 told me 3 principles when I was 5 years old, and then I learned how to calculate. And here I am. I'm an IM. I win tournaments.
Yeah, that's all I needed.
Okay, so what I'm going to ask you guys in just a second is not just the evaluation, but things you notice and the dynamics of the position as you see them. Yeah. Like the last, and I kind of primed you guys with the last example to try to, I don't know, say things that are interesting or salient about the position.
Well, first thing we have to mention the kings.
Yeah.
Okay.
Black
Black
king
king
can't
is
castle.
moved. Means can castle, white's king has more flexibility.
Okay, interesting.
The e6 pawn covers what would otherwise maybe be slightly weak spots at d5 and f5.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it's still double isolated pawns, so white's got a minimal edge.
What else? What else can you say?
So I found that these positions are very tough for white to prove anything. And you get like similar end games, I think, out of d4 as well. For example, like d4, d6, c4, e5. I feel like you get kind of a similar end game in nature. And there are some King's Indian lines as well, where black goes in early e5, white takes, trades queens, and gets like a big lead in development. But there, especially when the pawn is on c4, the structure for white is kind of shaky in the long run because you've given it this d4 square. This one kind of feels like a better version for white because we haven't had to compromise our structure. We traded off our bad bishop. But at the same time, it's like Well, white's only pawn break, as far as I understand, is to play f4. And this one I think is often double-edged because it allows black to undouble their pawns, gives them the e5 square. We might have to give up the g4 square as well by playing f4. So it's kind of like a double-edged advance.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's probably important where black chooses to put their king. Probably like a big difference between playing to c7 or e7, kind of in the Berlin endgame, you can play king c8 or king e8, makes a big difference. I'll add to what Kostya said about this could come out of, a King's Indian defense or things. This can also come out of a Rui Lopez or a Joko Piano, this kind of structure here. I actually commented a game yesterday. It was a 90 move endgame between two kids, actually 98 moves maybe, between two kids in this opening, in this endgame. And they got to it from black playing d5 in a Joko Piano, trading on e4, and then playing bishop e6 and trading bishops on e6. So in that game, white had played with the pawn on c3 and knight on d2, which I think would help white a little bit compared to here, because knight d4 would be maybe the main kind of dynamic counterplay for black right out the gate. And in that game, even though it always looked like visually slightly better for white, this game I watched, it never seemed clear that white could make any progress.
Okay. Kos, you want to add anything before we start this party, and then I talk terrible things, talk some smack about what you guys just said?
Yeah, one game that I think everyone should look up and maybe study that I thought was kind of useful for these positions is the game Vallejo pawns white against Magnus black. And Magnus, I thought, won a really instructive game on the black side of kind of a similar structure where it seems like he's kind of worse, but not really. I think very, very instructive game.
Okay. So, you guys in the live chess?
Yeah.
Okay, so here we go. And we're going to run it back so it doesn't matter too much. If you guys are just watching the show for the first time, the way we do it is we are training ourselves for endgames. And we're doing this new-fangled 30-second increment stuff. And we're trying to get better at it. Ooh, and let's get better at it right now by getting your business proper here, buddy. All right. Here it comes. All right, so here we start. They're going to disengage their mics while I say terrible things about their play. That's the way the show works. And we're going to say here, Mr. Bruce is white, so we're going to change this up. And we're going to say David is white. And do I have the times wrong? I often do. Let's figure this out. So, yes, I have the times wrong. But there is a simple trick for fixing this. Okay, so there it is. So one of the things that I thought was very critical about what they were saying, okay, is their reference point was games where we get this exchange on d8, of which there are many. For example, the game Carlsen, the Vallejo versus Carlsen game is amazing. However, totally different in the respect that with the pawns, the double pawns. In that game with Carlsen, the pawns are not doubled. And they needed to talk about the double pawns, because the thing that they need to say is that the double pawns are a dynamic weakness. And by that I just mean that, kind of like hanging pawns or an isolated pawn, they have some beautiful properties where, in particular, we're controlling the opponent. Like the isolated pawn and the hanging pawns, though, they can become weak if white trades off some pieces, in particular some minors. So if we imagine it going down into a rook endgame, then we can say, well, clearly white is much better then. But at the moment, it's a very tricky situation for white because the pieces could potentially get strangled. And we can see here that if Kostya plays a move like a6, he could play king e7 first. Both knights don't really have a clue about what they're doing, right? Knight b5, for example, we could play a6 and let him take on d6, fixes our pawns, and we're not doing terribly at all. The other thing I want to be critical about what they were saying is kind of jokingly, because we had talked about the kings from last week, where I was like, think about the kings. I think David or Kostya said, they kind of agreed with one another, that white's king was better. And I know it's not clear to me at all. The black king, if anybody, seems better. Okay, now with this, I want to say, this position, that we could critique some of the moves by, like, if we're going to critique one move by black, let's mention that knight c6 feels more aggressive in this position, more options, especially if we are not going to play c6 ourselves. One difference to the other endgames they were mentioning, for example, is in those endgames, c6, king c7 makes a lot of sense because you need to control d5. But here, the pawn's already on e6, so no need to play c6, right? So those positions we play knight bd7. Here, knight c6 feels more aggressive with thoughts of maybe knight d4 someday. Also, maybe thoughts of knight f6 to d7, right? More flexible. Okay, so here we go. And now knight d3. We're going to give Kostya some kudos for at least trying to fix the knight on e2. The question is going to be, though, how much of a service have we done ourselves? For example, if black plays something like c5 now, it's not clear that the knight on d3 is in that great of a spot, right? And you can, I think, start to feel, you can start to feel that white's pieces can be getting the crimp. And one of the interesting things to me about the position is there's an interesting thing where the trend of the position is going to go in black's way unless white finds a path out of the gate that's very clear. And maybe even a key thing for white might be to try to be more modest in the approach. For example, if we go over here, a modest approach here would be to play knight b5 and steal the bishop. Now black maybe should have played a6 to even stop it, but knight b5 takes the bishop, then we can say, right, a little bit better. And one of the things I really want to stress is when I'm still upset with knight bd7, is it neglects this guy. Because this guy, he needs help after f3. And it's clear that white's going to play f3 after knight e2, right? He has a choice on move 1, knight f3, knight e2. So this guy kind of wants to go back to this square. And that knight on d7 is in the way, hence knight c6. However, perhaps in this position, well, especially if c5, we could have done. Now, does this move h6 appeal to me? No. No, it doesn't. Because black, I think, should be taking up space on the queen side. c5, b5, maybe c4, start pushing those minors around. The essence of the position is to try to dominate white's minors, and don't let them exchange. h6, maybe he's dreaming of like g5, knight f8, g6. It's all too slow, and it's leaving the battle over there on the queen side. Like that knight on d7 really does need to stay there for the moment to control c5. So I didn't like h6. Here we go now. I'm going to going to try to organize my windows a little bit better here, my friends. Oh, don't move it. Oh, cry. Oh. See, that's the problem with ever touching the windows, buddy. Don't touch the windows. Don't touch the windows. Now, Master. Master 9. As I said, I don't like h6, g5 at all. I thought c5, b5 from black is great. I do not understand why white's queenside is solid. His pieces are going to get run over there. If we get in c5, c4, oh, then great. And this thing, h6, g5, just, well, now white can really start dreaming about h4. He can think about playing h4 now, or he could play h4 after g4. One terrible thing about this, I kind of have to have the chess.com window open, or else it doesn't let me do my thing here. Why is that? No one knows. Okay, Kraai, I got a way for you to deal with this. We're gonna put this window over here. Don't. Okay. All right, good. I think I got it under control. That's right. This is Capablanca Kraai, 1927. Yeah, I don't like what Kostya's done. And as I said, g4 looks interesting, and h4 looks interesting. Someone mentioned knight d1, f2. That's also kind of cool. And notice how terrible the knight on f6 is. So, Kostya's now given white a clear target. And that's the joy in this position for white. If black blows it like this and gives white a target, then all of a sudden we know what we're doing, right? Yeah, terrible. Jesse, can I address the knight on c3? Yeah. There's a kind of joke in ChessDojo history where Vishnu and Mitch Fabian get so upset when I talk about a knight getting dominated. They're like, Kraai, you're talking about it again. How could you possibly be doing it? How could you be doing it to us, Kraai, to talk about it again? We told you, we're tired of listening to you talk about the knight being dominated. I was talking to a student today, and he had been listening to a previous Endgame Sensei, where I was talking about the dominatrix. Now, maybe I shouldn't have been talking about the dominatrix, because his wife was listening in and perked up her eyebrows and said, husband dearest, what is it that you are listening to over there? So I'm getting people in trouble. In any case, he wants me to call like a pawn on c6 dominating a knight, or a pawn on c3 the dominatrix. And maybe it's going to come into ChessDojo lore that we're going to start talking about the dominating pawn being the dominatrix. In this case, the dominatrix is this guy, the pawn on f3, killing the knight on f6. And we got to mention that, of course, the pawns on e4 and g4 are also killing that poor knight. Yeah, knight f8 maybe, but then h4 is going to come, and it's going to be certain grief. Certain grief. If black could, of course, play two moves in a row, knight f8, g6, well then he's maybe okay. These guys stinking up the dojo, man. It's just stinking up the dojo. One thing that's, I think might be, sometimes it's helpful to make fun of ourselves and our friends and our students if it's in a fun and constructive way. But I do want to say, like the old timers, the old GMs who can't calculate anymore, of which I'm rapidly becoming one of them, right? They like to talk about how when you play the kids, you want to play the end game. And why is that? Why can't the kids, in this case Kostya, play the end game that well? And I think it's experience. I don't know. But I do think, what I am convinced of, is for our quest to get Kostya to be a GM, the guy needs to do some real endgame studying. He needs to improve his game with the endgame. And not just, and there, like I said, there's 3 layers, right? There's the endgame tactics. There is the maneuvering, which the beginning part of this will be. And then, of course, there's the algorithms, right? Things like, how to mate with a certain configuration or how to play X position. H4, very quick. This was all expected. And black needs something special, and here's his special here. Knight G6, he's going to sack a pawn and try to live. Do I believe it? I do not. But let's give him a chance. He's dreaming about rook H6, rook H6, bishop H6, rook H8, and then the claim that the bishop moves, and then rook H2 with play. Now, how true is it? I don't think it's true at all. Because if nothing else, the knight lands on F2 and there's no play. So yeah, it's not going to work. Yeah. And maybe even there's some way to play rook H1 after the bishop's on H6. That would be a tactical question, if you like. Also, I assume G5 just immediately there is also just a huge advantage. So, no bueno for our friend Kostya here. But at least he's kicking. He's kicking over here. We had a question in chat. Did we start using dominated because we realized chess was very sexy? That's an interesting question. I unfortunately did not invent the terminology dominated. Before I go on to dominate, let's say it's a critical position for white. I'd say bishop e3 is his default move, after which he is clearly better because you always have knight f2. And then rook h1. If he needs to, I really don't want him to play g5 because he would give counterplay with knight h5. Maybe you can play rook h1, but it gives me the heebie-jeebies. There, yeah, just bishop e3. No need to be fancy. Anyways, my first recollection of being impressed by the word dominated was when I got my hands on a copy of Kasparion's Domination in like 2,637 endgames. Did I get the exact number right? Probably not, but it's around that. It's a beautiful book. And the idea of domination, of course, it's a part of the game. It's a part of the game. We can definitely say that black is down a pawn and his pieces are dominated. What on earth was Kostya's idea? Well, I'm telling you, I think he found himself, h6, g5 was misguided, and then he didn't know what to do after g4, and so he's like, let's sack a pawn. And now I think the position is lost, technically lost, because rook h1's coming, there's no counterplay. And it'll still be, white still has to play well to win it. It's not totally simple or anything. And we're assuming at some point knight f4 is going to come, which we'll have to take that thing. I'm assuming we have to take the thing. Yeah. It's a bad news, of course. It's a bad news. Question from the chat, doesn't white just simplify to win? Well, it could be a big part of it, yeah. One bummer, for example, about knight f4 is, first of all, your knight on f6 is the one that needs help. But when you play knight f4, yes, you get my good bishop. Am I right? My bishop on e3, we're going to call our best piece. But what happens then is that pawn's on a dark square, and then you're going to trade off the rooks. So I assume like knight f4, bishop takes, pawn takes, rook h1. You can't play rook g2, or at least I don't believe you can play rook g2. Yeah, it's just a painful sitch.
A painful sitch. Yeah. And then we have a question, can we go king f1 after knight f4? Maybe. Maybe. If you want to, that would be the truly fancy move. You know, the nice thing for white is he has the default of taking. So he knows he's not, that black essentially has no counterplay. Yeah. I think this is one. Let me just say one of the reasons I wanted to do this position is that it followed on the heels of last week's position, which also came from an opening that is kind of common, like this one is. And bishop b4 does not inspire confidence. He's going off to take our worst piece. Oh gosh. I.e., if white played a3, I do not think we should take it. Okay. Drittman says, I know I'm a patzer because this position looks fine for both sides. Buddy, nota bene, white is up a pawn. If white weren't up a pawn, it might not be so bad. But one of the things I said at the beginning, definitely still applies here, is pawn or no pawn, white wants to trade the minors because those pawns on e5 and e6 are constraining our pieces. So for example, our knight on c3. So what is the only possible point of bishop b4? That you could take it, and you don't want to do it coast to coast. That's the worst, white's worst piece. So here we are. I guess we're expecting rook h1. That would be the simple man's move to play. I don't see anything wrong with it. And we got a statement that it's not just a pawn, it's a passer. Yes. And notice, one thing really to stress is the more pieces come off, the more the inflexibility of e5 and e6 comes to bear. And as per my dogma about endgames, if you want to ask yourself who's better or who's winning or anything like that, you're going to say it's winning when there's two advantages, right? And obviously one advantage would be a pawn. I'm up a pawn. And the next is, do I have something else? And in this case, right, we can talk about the knight on f6 being poor. Ooh, Kostya took the knight on c3. No GM for you, Kostya. No GM for you, buddy. Oh, I'm so cruel. So cruel to Kostya. But that was horrendous. He took off our worst piece, and he helped exchange minors, which is really what white wants. Further, the loss of the bishop is significant because my sensei, Vasily Smyslov, aptly wrote that bishops are better than knights in positions where there are passed pawns running. And we definitely we're going to have one of those. Now, let's try to do a little bit of justice to at least Kostya's intuition. He's hoping that if he gets a knight to, say, c4, that he will have some play, right? And I'm sure he understands that he's in big trouble. So we don't mess with him too much. We don't mess with him too much. And it's true, and we got to also say that we're happy that he's acknowledged that his knight on f6 is funky. Okay. And this game, honestly, we can imagine this going on for a while. This is, we're now in a phase of the game where white, more than anything, needs to control counterplay, right? And we're going to say the obvious move here is knight f2. And then he's going to have, after knight d6, honestly, there's a lot of different moves after knight d6. And let's say the other obvious thing is that getting the knight to c4 isn't actually the most special thing we've ever seen, right? But white still does, there's no doubt, white still does have to come up with a plan. Putting the knight on d3 makes a lot of sense. And then maybe king f2, g3, making black think about g5 and king g4. All that makes sense. I have a feeling David's going to play knight f2, d3. MD Knight is talking about not only knight to d3, but maybe knight c5 someday. That'll definitely be a tempo that black will owe us, having to deal with knight c5. That's right. Knight d3 is comforting, too, in a psychological sense, just because we're covering f4. Yeah. It's got to be said, man. David might not have grasped either last week's position or this one, but he's been schooling Kostya. Schooling him. When you look back at the stats for Endgame Sensei, David's been schooling him, man. Is king d3 a candidate? Absolutely, yeah. The only question about king d3 is, what are we going to do with our knight after we put our king on d3? Yeah. I am a little bit... of all the moves to make quickly here, it seems to me knight f2 would be one of them. I guess he's going some rabbit hole. He's going some rabbit hole about what to do. And now he's going to do this aggro move. Okay. So one of the things about David that's interesting is he's always been a very maximalist player. And this c4 move, it's very, it might be great, but it's like, let's say it's controversial because we haven't fixed our knight, right? But I'm willing to believe in it. And if we imagine black playing knight d6, is David's intention to play c5, or was it to play king d3? I do not like this move b6, Kostya. You're killing me, Kostya, because now, maybe he has, no, I don't like it. Daddy doesn't like it, because now white plays c5 and then you can't get the knight out easily. Now, one thought of b6 is, let's say David plays knight f2. That would be a little controversial, because then when knight d6 does come, then at least the c4 pawn will be a permanent target. So if white plays c5 immediately, then I guess to have any kind of fighting chance, black has to push past. But nota bene, then the knight on e8, no puedo squares have, No puedo squares have. b6, well said from Raid. b6 justifies c4. That's right. Sometimes we usually go over these games. I was about to say maybe we shouldn't go over this one later. This one's just stinking up the dojo. Just stinking it up. Now, there's a certain argument here where black could argue that the pawn on c5 is on a dark square, and thus black has made some kind of symbolic achievement. The problem is his knights are so bad, and the knight on d3, when it comes there, it's talking to b4, e5, f4. And then white can do so many different things. And in addition to knight d3, of course, he could play king d3 and c4 just to get his own business moving over there and then deal with his knight later. Actually, we got to be a little careful. I was about to say knight h4 might be a problem, and it might be, but at the moment it's not actually a threat because of bishop g5. All right, Kostya's playing with his pawns over there. And a5, we could argue, has to be played eventually, maybe, because knight b4 would be an issue. Okay, so we got to... Kostya needs a dream. He needs a dream now. And maybe the dream is something like c6, b4, knight c7, knight b5, knight c3. That's what they call long-winded, my friends. That is what they call long-winded. One thing for David is, obviously you want to stop. Probably objective number one is just making sure the knight never does anything. And we're going to see it. So that's Kostya's. I can read his mind. I can read his mind. The kid wants to play the knight into c7, maybe b5, maybe c3. All right, check to the miserable king. Let's see what David's intention is here. Yeah, I assume there's many plans for white. Oh, I'm not totally sure yet what bishop. Maybe he wants to play king e3 and f4 or something. One bummer for Kostya is if he goes king d7. Oh, he pins him. Self-pin. Self-pin. f4 might win on the spot. f4 might be GG. f4 might be GG, my friends. Which would at least... I was listening to a radio show about pneumonia and how it's the old man's friend. In this case, knight f6, it might be the old man's friend, you know? Because f4, it's going to be hard to meet. Let's just put it that way. f4 is going to be hard to meet, my friends. When you teach the kids, you always say pin and win, and that looks like a pin and win to me. Am I missing something, my friends? Is f4 not? I mean, we got to say, knight f6, even if f4 doesn't work, it's a pretty nasty move. Do you think they go back and watch me talk all this smack about them? do they watch me talk smack? We got a question from chat. f4, king f7, and then what? There's a variety of things. Someone mentioned f5. We would also have bishop f6, king f6, g5. The king goes somewhere. Yeah, it's abysmal. f4. All right, Kostya, resign, buddy. Let's get another. Let's run it back, Kostya. All right. Yeah. It ain't pretty. Bishop f6, king f6, g5 looks very strong. Very strong. .. Asterisk. Just subscribe. Oh. I don't know why his name has been censored. Rightly so. Rightly so, Master 9. Rightly so, your name's been censored. Okay, here we go. f5. It's got to be at least as good as bishop f6, g5. And I don't know where that knight's supposed to go, buddy. No, it's even better. It's even better. Holy moly. Time for the big resigns, Kostya Coast. Stinking up the dojo. Jeez. Stinking it up. Man, oh man. Well, that's how not to do it, my friends. That's how not to do it. Kostya's thinking up the dojo, man. Just resign, Kostya. This is ugly, man. We can't look anymore. I hope he doesn't think that he was only lost because of this f4 problem. I hope so. Oh, Kostya, buddy. What's going on? That's not going to help you, bro. That's not going to help. Oh, I'm sure both of them win. Yeah, both of them win. Well, my friends, yeah, stinking up the dojo. The thing about it is you got to resign. You got to resign, man. Go be like one of those Japanese samurai people, man. Just end it. Just end it. It's okay. It's okay. Death comes for all of us, coast to coast. It comes for all of us, buddy. Seth has clearly gotten bored with this position. I'm a little bored too, coast to coast. Okay? I'm a little bored too. Here's White's variety of ways of winning this position. I guess the simplest is bishop takes and king f3. But we already know Kostu won't resign that one. So is there a way to make it even easier? Oh, David's going for the easy one. Makes sense. Makes sense. Time for the big resigns in the sky, coast to coast. And kids don't resign these days. No respect. Now, in addition to king f4, we're threatening knight e5. Also painful. Probably both can't be stopped. Do we need a second weakness? Yeah, come on. He can seal the deal. There we go. All right, here they come. These chumps.
GG. GG.
All right, you guys, let's run it back. If you want to get really depressed, watch the VOD. I'm such a jerk. You guys have no idea. You probably don't watch the VOD.
Do we have time?
To run it back? As long as you resign in time this next game, buddy. Jeez, Melise, buddy. You got to give up when it's time to give up.
Okay.
All right, here we go. We're running it back.
Good luck.
And I think I might have to Jadoob the clocks and Jadoob this other thing here. So we got to make some Jadoobs. A lot of times I blow it here with the Jadoobs, but I'm not going to do it this time. So first thing is Kostya is white. And then Mr. Kraai. Who is... Oh, I always blow this here. All right. Kostya has got the 509. So we're going to make Jadoob. Oh! Oh, Kraai, don't blow it, buddy. Don't blow it. All right. Jadoobs. Zhupa. Zhoop. Now that's skills. That's skills. Okay. So now bishop c5. Interesting. Both of them committed to this knight e2. By the way, I just want to admit, I guess I'm a little bit agnostic as to whether knight f3 or knight e2 is better for white. Arguably, knight h3 makes some sense too, aiming for f3 and knight f2 to d3. But as I said, the knight going to d3, okay? The problem is, if black realizes what's going on and that he should be gaining, that his power is space, then he can be like, bro, well, I'm going to come at you like a spider monkey on the queen side with all that space. So bishop c5, let's call it frisky. Frisky because maybe knight a4 is something white wants because that knight is not the greatest. And also, but I think it's okay. I'm going to go ahead and say I'm going to ratify bishop c5. one of the cool things about this is, and I like king e7. So king e7 retains the flexibility as to whether we're going to play knight c6, knight bd7, that kind of thing. Again, in general, I like knight c6 better than knight bd7 because the knight on f6 wants to have a way into the game, right? White has spent some time to dominate the thing with f3 and e4, and now he needs to do something. And white, of course, has his own special problem about how to fix the knight on e2. And in the last game, as we saw, we had some fancy business with knight c1, d3. And then, right, coast to coast didn't understand you got to play for the domination over on the queen side. I don't know if either player really appreciates how powerful those central pawns are. They are real beauties when it comes to controlling the position. And one of the reasons Black's king could, there's potential, let's say, for it to be significantly stronger than the white king is just because the dynamic power of those pawns gives us, if we dominate the white pieces, our king will simply have more freedom than the white king. For example, here, white king we're going to castle long, we assume, right, at some point. I guess that's not entirely true. He could also still play a knight c1, d3 style. But the king is vulnerable. For example, if now knight c6, is the king going to e2? That's problematic. So just off the cuff, knight c6 looks very plausible for Mr. Black here. And I like black. Yeah, I like black. And notice that white hasn't done anything incredibly wrong, right? At least to the eye. And already after knight c6, black, look at it. He's thinking about knight d4. You got to worry about knight b4. All this stuff is going on. Yeah, no, this is great for black. And one of the reasons I wanted to do this video, by the way, this sensei on this position, is me and the boys, me and Ghost and David, are working on this thing we're calling the ChessDojo training program, and it's a big project, and we're trying to list out like certain requirements for each rating band, say 1,000 to 1,100, for example. What do you need to do to make it to the next level? And one of my key ideas, or one of the ideas I like, is to have positions where people spar. Endgame positions, for example, but also opening positions. And part of my opening positions idea is that the dojo should try to play like certain repertoires, right? Like that we specialize in certain repertoires, and that way when we fight one another in the sparring, we have some like special knowledge, and we have special files for our openings. And this would be an example of it, because if you understand what's going on here as black, you can see the practical advantage, because these chumps, just looking at it, they're clueless to, I feel like David has made a jump from the last game, but just in their description, when you hear them talking about it at first, you can get it. They're like, oh yeah, they don't really understand what's going on. So that's an example of something I'm interested in. For black here, I like knight c6, and at some point, some later, knight d7. And then that knight can cruise over. There it is, knight c6, beautiful. I think white's got a real problem on his hands here. And on just a basic tactical level, he can ask himself, well, if knight c1, what am I going to do after knight d4? It's a real question. Now I'm assuming knight c1, knight d4, knight d3 is in fact playable, but it's going to be complicated with knight c2. Let's just say that. At the very least, things going to be complicated. And the good news for black is if knight c1, knight d4, knight d3, you don't have to take on c2. You go back to d6. Okay, so here's knight a4. And as I mentioned like 3 million years ago, I said this was the potential problem with bishop b4. Now, to my mind, bishop d6 is absolutely the default move. Black needs to understand, this would be an example of secrets of the position, that he does not want to trade minor pieces. That white's pieces are the ones that are dominated by these big, fat, and hairy pawns. So bishop d6, there is no then dominatrix with c3. Right? The black-clad dominatrix, as was mentioned in chat. There is no c3 because of b5. And c3 would be a nice move for white because it would be cool if we could stop knight d4. Oh, Bruce. Now, Daddy doesn't like it. I don't like it at all. I don't like it at all. No bueno. Because now, white is better after both knight d4 and c3. After bishop d6, I definitely thought black was better. Man, oh man. It's interesting, right? Like, clearly they don't understand the dynamics of the position. Now, I'll just stress, the reason white's better after knight d4, regardless of how you recapture, is because the bishop on d2 is so strong. It doesn't matter about the pawns getting undoubled. And the knight is not in trouble after we take the bishop on d4 because it always has knight c5 to d3. Now, this is probably fine, but it might give black some hope. I don't know what that hope is, but maybe there's some hope of complicating the position now. David still doesn't get it. So now here's the interesting thing. Now c3 is a little bit different because then black can dream about playing bishop f2 followed by maybe b5. And I don't know exactly what to think about that position, but it's at least not 100% clear. Do I think that knight d4 is an advantage for white? Yes, I do. The bishop on d2 is great. And again, we're just trading off our pieces, not a good thing. And one of the things I don't think he understood is after bishop d6, we were really threatening to cramp white's position with things like b5 and knight d7 and knight d4. Yeah, they didn't understand. Question from chat, it's 5-0. Well, it's 5-0 plus 30. You get 30 seconds. So we could potentially be here all day, especially if somebody doesn't resign. You know what I'm saying? Hint, hint. Yeah, I think Master 9, he is confused about it. Yeah. It's interesting in the respect that, you know, we're dealing with two guys that are very talented, and they don't understand chess. I'm so cruel, man. So cruel. But there's just fundamental things they're not getting. And gives the rest of us chumps hope, because it means that even if we don't have epic talent, we can still put up a fighting game against them, right? We can still give it a fighting game because they don't know what they're doing. Okay, so bishop b6. I thought bishop f2 would be a way to kind of muddy the waters. I didn't believe in black's position there, but it was a thought. And now if white wants a simple advantage, he could take on b6. But it's true that there's no rush to take the thing. Now b4, let's ask ourselves, what is the point of b4? I'm not sure I like it. b4 is a very highfalutin move. If you just take on b6 and play, let's say, a3, you're going to be much better. And this move, no, I don't like it. I mean, what's the argument here that we're going to do something like knight b2 to c4 and a4, a5? And I don't know. So b4, I don't like it. Now, David should be thinking at some point soon about fixing his knight on f6. b4. Ghost, what are you doing, man? All right, so h6. Now you might recall that I screamed at Kostya for playing h6, g5 in the last game. This h6, I suspect, I hope, has a different intention, which would be to fix the knight on f6, which we can't fully do until we prevent bishop g5, right? So here he comes, and I did not understand this b4 move. The only way I could make myself understand if like you could do c4, I don't see it. Now maybe you could think about king b3, knight d6, c4. In all those positions, though, you got to wonder about knight d4 check. And if we ever take the bishop, then it's clear we should have taken it earlier, right? This b4 thing did not improve our situation. And I think we need to get rid of it. So here's a basic thing. Kostya didn't understand that fundamentally, white wants to trade the minors. That's when he could get a knight's advantages, when the minors come off. Whew, man, he's getting schooled by David in these things, man. Is b4 an observer effect? Now, that is very interesting to me. What do you mean, an observer effect? That sounds like the cool highfalutin concept that I should know about, the observer effect. I've never seen Endgame Sensei before. Is the idea that they start with an unfamiliar middle game, endgame position and play it out for educational purposes? While getting verbally abused behind their back. Yes. That's right. Okay, so here we go, knight d6. And there's real questions for Mr. Kostya here. The other point is to train ourselves to play this newfangled time control that's now prevalent of 5:30. That's definitely part of it. All right, and before I comment further on it, let's just say the tactical phase is now upon us. And Kostya's gotten himself into a position where no one knows what's happening anymore. And there's no reason to think that he's better after knight c4. So basically, Kostya's betting the house on the idea that knight c5 will create drama for black. If black leaves the knight on d6, as he's done here, then the pawn on b7 isn't even threatened. And a5 looks good, where now b5 is impossible. And maybe Kostya told himself a story about how the pawns being doubled on b6 were a cool thing for him. I don't know about that either, my friend. Note to Ben, if he takes on b6, the knight on b3 is dominated. And as we like to talk about here on ChessDojo, there's little black-clad dominatrixes all around the board. Black-clad dominatrix is also obvious, but true. If you take on b6, you then have to start worrying about the c-file as well. So, yeah, difficult moment for white here. I really think Kostya needs some endgame help, dude. And, you know, I really want to stress, I don't actually consider myself some endgame expert. I really don't. This guy I'm working with, KGB, like, the distance between us in endgame understanding is severe, to put it mildly. Severe. He took on b6. Oh, now, honestly, maybe his position's so nasty that he's got to do it. But it just hurts to see, you know. This hurts to see, because now black is definitely better. Yeah. Nasty. Nasty, nasty girls. I don't even know what you're supposed to do here as white, man. I don't know. Ugh. Let me just say something obvious. Smyslov in his book, Endgame Virtuoso, says, knights are better when there are local weaknesses. And hello, my friends, we're dealing with local weaknesses. Now, if that move works, that's the move of the century. I don't see it working, though. I'm sorry, Kostya. To me, what, am I missing something? Am I missing something, Kostya Kost? You got a trick? What about our friend knight b5? To me, that looks like a pawn, my friend. And bishop e3 isn't going to save you there. We got our friend knight a3 check to knight c4. Ouch. Kostya's stinking up the dojo again, man. Hopefully he'll resign quicker. Let's get a quicker resign than last time. What is the intention with b5? This is gross. That looks like a pawn. Master 9 says, I notice Kostya sacks pieces when he knows he made a mistake. Yeah. And truthfully, when things go bad, you should be looking to sack a pawn. But in this case, to me, it looks like black's got the pawn and the compensation, you know? He'd have got no compensation for losing that pawn. That knight on you know, yeah, they're look at this thing. Oh, gosh. Loads of good moves here for black. All right, so the only good thing we can say about this is if black plays knight d6, then bishop a3 will happen. There is that. We're going to give him that, okay? There's a lot of good moves here for David. A lot of good moves. I don't even know which one is the best. Rook dc8. I like it. Simple and strong. And one thing I wanted to remark on it earlier is that the rook going to d8 for black was a very intuitive move, but it's not clear that the thing belonged there. Because the black's king is controlling all the entrance squares. That's one of the beautiful things about him. And so it's not, and there's nothing obvious anyway that black is doing on the d file. And we got, actually, also, Merle says not trading should be right. And yeah, in general, it's white's king who's under pressure. In the last game when Kostya sacked the pawn, there was a glimmer of activity. This time, I don't even know what the glimmer is. I don't see any glimmer. Bishop b2. Look at that. Bishop went from being the best piece on the board to this disgusting mess. Disgusting mess. Oh, man. Now there's so many things for black to contemplate. a4, a3, knight b4. I mean, I don't know. Knight b4 looks hard to deal with, man. I mean, knight b4, aren't you just winning a pawn? Isn't that a pawn? Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to speak with you again. I want to eat all your pawns he wants. I hope he resigns when his pawns are gone. Yeah, knight b4. Daddy no comprendo. I don't know what he wants. I mean, maybe he wants knight b4, king d2. That's gross, but I don't know what else he wants, man. I don't know what else. Oh, gosh. He could also go a4, a3, and then knight b4. Oh, gosh. Oh, buddy. It is so unpleasant. I don't have any advice for Kostya except resigning. Look at this, knight c3. Kostya, Kost, that's another pawn, buddy. And you got to take it, unfortunately, bud. David might even come up with some cruel thing where he doesn't even take that thing. Or he plays rook c3 just to be a jerk. No, he's going to finish him off the old-fashioned way. Kostya, give up. Don't make me look at it anymore. Look at how his knight on b3 is even dominated by all the pawns that he gave black. Horrendo. Horrendo. This is awful, man. Look at this. Resign. What are you going to do? What do you want in this position, bro? He's got it all. He's got, a famous old phrase is, I've got the pawn and the compensation. David has the pawns plural and the compensation. Pawns plural. No one knows. No one knows what happened to Kostya. Something must have happened to him, though, right? Something very wrong must have happened to our friend Kostya Kost. There it is. Resigns. All right. Here they come.
Did you have a good time, Jesse?
Oh, man, that was a good time, my friend. That was a good time. My hair went white, beard went white. Oh, man. My throat, hoarse. Yeah. Okay, this is what I propose to you, gentlemen. You guys should watch the VOD. It was class. It was real class. I would say let's stop it here. And I think the main points are in the VOD. And then we'll come back for talks. How does that sound?
Okay.
All right.
Whatever you say, Sensei.
It's just part of the spiel that I'm so mean, okay? It's just part of the spiel. Everybody likes it. Everybody likes it, except maybe you guys. You guys are pretty good sports about it.
Jesse, we don't hear you during the game, so I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay,